Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a hard look at the highest office in the United States, which, as it turns out, is unequivocally one of the absolute most dangerous jobs in the entire world. But here's the thing. The threats to a president's life haven't always come from the places you'd expect. We're going to take a really fast-paced, cinematic look through history to explore the highly improbable, deeply tragic, and honestly sometimes outright bizarre ways that U.S. presidents have met their ends. From shocking statistical anomalies to the fatal consequences of really bad medicine, the true stories behind these presidential ends are way stranger than fiction.
Okay, let's dive into this. 3. Out of all the days in the year, what are the odds that 3 of our earliest American presidents would all pass away on the exact same date? It's an insane statistical anomaly. I mean, it's a historical coincidence so wild that if you wrote it into a movie script, nobody would actually believe it.
Section 1. Eerie July 4th Coincidences.
So to really understand this first coincidence, we have to look back at 2 founding bros of the United States, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson literally wrote the Declaration of Independence and Adams helped defend it. Total squad goals, right? But by the election of 1800, these 2 friends had become incredibly bitter political rivals. Fast forward through a decade of absolute silence and they finally reconnect as pen pals. They patch up this legendary friendship just in time for history to play a massive trick on them both. On July 4th, 1826, which is exactly 50 years to the day after signing the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, who is suffering from a whole slew of illnesses, including pneumonia, holds on just long enough to ask, is it the 4th? And then he passes away. Just a few hours later, on that exact same day, John Adams dies of heart failure up in Massachusetts. 5 years after that, on July 4th, 1831, James Monroe succumbs to tuberculosis, becoming the 3rd president to die on Independence Day. And hey, just for a fun fact, James Madison almost made it a 4-way tie. He was on his deathbed just days prior, but when his doctors offered him stimulants to keep him alive until July 4th, he essentially refused, passing away on June 28th instead.
Now, the profound dramatic irony of these last words is just staggering. As John Adams lay dying on that fateful July 4th, his final famous statement was, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He was completely unaware that hundreds of miles away, his lifelong frenemy had passed away just hours earlier.
Section 2. Bizarre Ends and Bad Medicine.
We're leaving the spooky coincidences behind for a second to look at the sheer, terrifying danger of being sick in the 18th and 19th centuries. Back then, it wasn't always political enemies that took down our leaders. Sometimes archaic medical practices were significantly deadlier than the actual diseases. Take our very first president, George Washington. He caught a severe throat infection, likely epiglottitis, which, is easily curable today with some basic antibiotics. But doctors back then relied on bloodletting. They would literally cut the patient to drain their blood, genuinely thinking it would purge the illness. So they drained a staggering 80 ounces of blood from Washington. To put that into perspective for you, that's the equivalent volume of 6 Red Bulls. Predictably, this made things way, way worse, and Washington died shortly after.
And then we have the legendary case of William Henry Harrison, who still holds the record for the shortest presidency at just 31 days. The old myth you probably heard in school is that he caught pneumonia and died because he gave an insanely long 2-hour inauguration speech in the freezing rain without a coat. But the actual truth? Harrison didn't even get sick until 3 weeks later. Modern experts now point to typhoid fever or septic shock, which was most likely caused by contaminated drinking water right there at the White House. But honestly, perhaps the most bizarre dietary demise belongs to Zachary Taylor. During a sweltering July 4th celebration in D.C., Taylor tried to cool off with a pretty unique snack. He ate this massive bowl of raw cherries and washed the whole thing down with several glasses of milk. And because food safety in the 1800s was practically non-existent, he ended up contracting fatal gastroenteritis and died just days later. Now, because pre-Civil War tensions were running really high at the time, a lot of people assumed he was politically poisoned. But in the 1990s, forensic scientists actually exhumed his body, tested it, and proved definitively that there was no foul play. It really was just some fatally bad cherries.
Section 3. The weight of the office. Beyond bad snacks and bad medicine, there is an undeniable, crushing physical and emotional toll that comes with the presidency. The sheer weight of this office can literally break the human body down. Consider the heartbreaking final days of Ulysses S. Grant. The legendary Civil War hero left office only to lose his entire life savings in a Ponzi scheme, and to make matters worse, a 20-cigar-a-day habit finally caught up with him in the form of brutal throat cancer. Bankrupt and dying, Grant spent his final days desperately writing his memoirs through agonizing pain, all just to ensure his family wouldn't be left destitute. And he succeeded, finishing the book just before he passed. His final, simple request as cancer ravaged his throat was just a single word: water.
That kind of physical devastation is perfectly encapsulated by Woodrow Wilson's poignant final realization. While actively serving in office, Wilson suffered a massive stroke that left him partially paralyzed, and he never fully recovered from it. His tragic realization that his own body could no longer bear the burdens of life or leadership is forever captured in his heartbreaking final words about being a broken piece of machinery.
And speaking of burdens, look at what Franklin D. Roosevelt carried on his shoulders. He pushed his body through an unprecedented 4 terms as president. The physical toll on the man was unimaginable. I mean, he suffered from high blood pressure, heart disease, and a secret paralysis from polio. Add to that the unimaginable mental stress of navigating the entire country through the Great Depression and World War II. FDR's body finally just gave out during his 4th term. He suffered a fatal, massive stroke while simply sitting and posing for a portrait at his retreat in Georgia.
Section 4. Bullets and Assassinations.
We have to transition now to the darkest moments in American history. While many presidents died of illness or the sheer stress of the job, 4 were abruptly and violently killed while in power. The first, of course, was Abraham Lincoln, shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth at Ford's Theater. What's incredibly haunting about this are Lincoln's final words. Just seconds before the fatal shot, Lincoln was holding his wife's hand in the theater box. When she asked what their friends might think of this scandalous public display of affection, he offered this very casual reassurance. She won't think anything about it. He never spoke another word.
And this brilliantly illustrates the horrific intersection of assassination and the bad medicine we were discussing earlier. This is James Garfield's story. He gets shot in the back by a mentally unstable man at a train station. But here's the crazy part. The bullet actually misses all of his major organs. Garfield absolutely should have survived. Instead, his doctors step in and begin probing the wound with entirely unsterilized tools, with one doctor even accidentally puncturing his liver. Garfield didn't die from the assassin's bullet at all. He died over an excruciating 80 days from massive infections caused entirely by medical malpractice.
Following Garfield was William McKinley. He was shot in the abdomen by anarchist Leon Chalgos during a meet-and-greet in Buffalo. And once again, the doctors couldn't properly locate the bullet. Gangrene set in, and McKinley passed away 8 days later. Now, this assassination was the breaking point. An exhausted and terrified American public demanded change, and as a direct result of this, the Secret Service was finally assigned their full-time responsibility of protecting the president.
Sadly, as we know, even that dedicated protection couldn't prevent the tragedy at Dealey Plaza. John F. Kennedy, the youngest president ever killed in American history, was riding in an open motorcade when he was struck by a sniper's bullet fired by Lee Harvey Oswald. Just seconds prior to that fatal shot, Nellie Connolly, who was sitting right there in the car with him, remarked, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." And JFK's final words in total agreement were, "No, you certainly can't."
Section 5. Modern Medicine and Longevity.
Despite all these immense tragedies, the story of the American presidency doesn't end in darkness. As we move into our final era here, we see a dramatic shift. The crucial point to take away is this massive statistical leap. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, the average lifespan of a president was about 70 years old. But by the 20th century, that jumped to 78 years old. So what changed? Well, it was the full-time protection of the Secret Service combined with massive, revolutionary advancements in modern, top-tier medical care. Surviving the presidency became significantly more likely.
And this really brings us to the modern century club of presidents. Despite holding what we know is the most dangerous job in the world, just look at these incredible ages. Jimmy Carter reached a staggering 100 years old, passing away naturally in late 2024, noting that he was finally ready to see his late wife Rosalind again. George H.W. Bush reached 94, and his final touching words to his son were simply, "I love you too." Gerald Ford lived to 93, with his family keeping his final moments peacefully private. And Ronald Reagan also reached 93, though he tragically lost his final words to a decade-long battle with Alzheimer's.
So, to summarize the really intense statistics we've covered in this explainer, out of all the men who have held this office, exactly 8 presidents have died while actively serving. And it's a perfect split. 4 were assassinated, and 4 died from natural causes and illnesses.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. From those bizarre July 4th coincidences and the fatal consequences of a bowl of raw cherries, to the physical deterioration caused by immense stress and the ever-present threat of a sniper's bullet, What is the true personal cost of holding the most dangerous job in the world? It's a heavy question that history continually asks us, and honestly, one that every future president is going to have to answer. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.